So let's start. Just like I said, Ricky, a few minutes ago, it's really an honor to have you as our first guests of the Journey Talk. Just like I said, this is our second week. Chris Stetzel he was one of the biggest like he's a friend, and he helped me a lot just to start, go ahead, try, and we go from there. So it's also an honor to have you participating in this event and being a member of the community. Sven, Pedro, Nick, welcome, our friend from the UK. Ricky, again, thank you so much for being with us in this informal conversation, and we are really looking forward to get some inspiration for you. And for those who don't know you well, and let's try to avoid those cliche presentations. Uh, what can you just tell us a little bit more about you, like something funny, something that people don't know. We know that you are ultra runner, rider, photographer. You are a very humble and inspiring person. But who is Ricky?
Yeah. So I guess most recently I've been described, I've got a good friend in San Francisco who's an amazing artist. His name's Charlie Lease. And he's been watching what I've been doing lately. And he came up with this term, conceptual runner. And kind of playing off of that term of conceptual artist and endurance runner. So yeah, my name is Rickey Gates. I'm from Colorado. I've been running and racing for the past 25 years of my life. I was very much defined by both the outside world and by myself as a racer. That started off with track and cross country in high school and into college. And then I discovered my love for trail and mountain running, and that took me on a 10 to 15-year journey racing around the States and in Europe, and also in South America, over in Asia, and even to Antarctica. Um, and then I grew a little bit weary of both that title and the lifestyle and the kind of the demands of having to maintain that level of fitness and competitive spirit kind of year round, and that's when I started upon kind of this current title that my friend gave me of conceptual runner. And so I kind of come up with running projects that inspire both myself and ideally others, and follow them through and kind of see what happens.
One thing that I find really interesting is that at this moment, do you still compete?
I do still compete, yeah, and I've got a couple races, hopefully coming up this coming summer, that I'm really looking forward to.
Uh-huh,
I've
uh-huh.
definitely not retired from racing.
No,
I still
because
get
I
a lot
thought
out of
I
it.
thought that you were just doing your conceptual artists plus running thing. And because normally when we see even on social media like athletes, runners, that they are just focused on running. It's actually their like his or her job. It's because they compete. We don't see that many athletes that don't compete but still are paid to like being like a running advocate. So that's why I ask if you'd still compete. Do you remember your first race? How was it?
Yeah, I do remember my first race. It was when I was 13. I must have been 13 years old. It was a 5 kilometer race in Aspen, Colorado. The race was set up as a fundraiser for a youth program in Aspen, and I was participating in the youth program. It was called the Aspen Youth Center, the Aspen Alpine Club. And it was set up so that the youth in the Aspen area could get out and take advantage of the mountains and the trails in the area, perhaps for kids that didn't have parents that were taking them out there. My parents were very supportive, but they had no real concept of camping out in the wilderness, and so it was a great opportunity for me. And so to kind of help raise money, me and 4 or 5 other kids in this group, we wore kind of our backpacks and harnesses and a rope, and we ran this 5 kilometer race and raised some more money for our group. So that was, yeah, kind of an indelible mark on my first time running racing.
Was it like first love at first sight when you just started to run, or it was like I'm going to do this just for fundraising and that's it?
It definitely was not love at first sight. I enjoyed it. But what I enjoyed more than anything was hanging out with my friends. And I would say that continued on for several years. I joined the cross country team either the next year or the year after. And again, it wasn't really about the running. It was about hanging out with my friends and meeting people.
Okay. And why? So before you started to run on like mountains, like trail running, you were doing track running, right?
I started cross country first, which
Yeah. Uh-huh.
the coach was pretty adamant about getting us out on the trails. He moved to Aspen from the East Coast because he loved the mountains, and that's what kept him there for 25 years. And so there was 2 or 3 days a week where our training, he just we all went to the trails and did our practices there.
Okay. Let me take just some time. Hey, Nick, Chris, Sven, Pedro, if you have any question, please just turn your mic and go ahead. You want to ask some question, Chris?
Sure.
Go ahead, buddy.
Ricky, thanks so much for coming. This is pretty awesome. Never got to talk to a star before. So my question is look, I agree with you. Running is kind of it's especially when you're a kid. I mean, it's got to be very difficult to get into it and just to really, say, oh my God, this is fun. For me, sometimes it's not fun at all, but you do it because you got to go do it to get in shape and all that kind of stuff. But so I kind of think about like, being a professional runner and things like, is that what you do for a living? And are you always trying to push for sponsors? Is it, what is that life like? Like trying to get people to sponsor you to try to get, because you got to live, and I mean, I'm always curious to see how runners do that. I'll never be a professional
That's an
athlete,
interesting question. Yeah, I kind of like, yeah,
so
that's an interesting question. Yes.
Yeah, so I picked up my first sponsorship. We're coming up on 12 years ago. I asked a friend. This is when I was living in Boulder, Colorado, and I had already made a couple U.S. mountain running teams. And frankly, I was tired of paying for my running shoes. And I asked a friend of mine, "How do I get sponsored?" It was Adam Chase.
yeah,
He
I've heard of
was
him.
early in the sport of mountain running and trail running. And he told me a lot of really important things about getting sponsored. But most importantly, he was put in charge of the Solomon running team, the US portion of it, just a few months later, and then asked me to join.
That's
And
awesome.
since then, I've had maybe 1 or 2 other sponsors in addition to Solomon. It's something that to be quite honest, I've been quite careful about.
Mm,
It's like to kind of paint a picture for you, like it's never been worth it for me since then to just get product from a sponsor. Like I do need that financial support,
sure.
and that's a two-way street. If a sponsor is paying you money, like if you're on their payroll, like they're gonna ask for something out of you, and you're
Hmm.
gonna try and deliver that same product back to them, and that's always been very important. I have been offered a lot of sponsorships over the years, product sponsorships. It seems like CBD sponsorships are a dime a dozen right now. I've got a million samples here at my house. Thank you guys for sending those to me, but like it's just I don't quite get it. But yeah, the so
Mm,
finding for me, finding one good sponsor over the past decade has really, I mean, yeah, for lack of a better phrase, it really has changed my life.
Yeah.
And
Awesome.
am forever indebted to Solomon for that, for initially seeing a competitive athlete and then seeing the artist in that competitive athlete, and then allowing that athlete to pursue more of an artistic form rather than competition. So we've really grown together over the years. In addition to that, like Solomon doesn't pay all of my bills. It's a portion of my salary. I've had to figure out other ways to make money, and early on in my career, this was very easy for me. I grew up in Aspen, Colorado, which is a service community oriented service oriented community. It was always very easy for me to return home after several months of traveling and find a job waiting tables or bussing tables or bartending or whatever it might be. I was always very upfront with them. I'd say like, listen, I'm only looking for a job for 4 or 5 months. Here's my resume. I'm good at what I do. You're not going to have to worry about me for the next 5 months. I'll work my butt off. And 9 times out of 10, they'd say, you know what, a good server is better than a bad server,
Yeah.
and we'll take you on. We appreciate
Awesome.
that.
You still do that?
I don't do that anymore, so that helped me out for the first several years. And then that's kind of when I moved into like, all right, how can I make running pay a little bit more without seeking more sponsorships?
Mm-hmm.
And in addition to like finding the races that would that I could potentially make some money in. I started pursuing writing and photography. And so Trail Runner magazine early on, I told them this was after my first time going to Europe to race over there for 5 months. I came back and I went to the editor of Trail Runner magazine and I said, I just had the most incredible experience. I've never really read about it in your magazine. I just raced in Europe for 5 months, and there's an entire culture over there that's dedicated to making this happen. And they said, write about it, we'll pay you. And so
Love it.
that was my first of, at this point now, 15 to 20 feature-length articles. I had a column with them for a few years, and all of these, in addition to being able to live a very modest lifestyle, helped pay for the life that I was living.
Mm-hmm.
And then fast forward a couple more years, we're talking now 8 years ago. I kind of had this idea that I wanted to share what I love about running with the community beyond just writing about it. And that's when I made this idea of running hut to hut in
Yeah.
the Colorado Rockies. I made that happen. And
Hut
so
run,
this
hut,
was
hut run hut, and bus
Hut Run
run
Hut.
bus.
Yeah.
And yeah, Bus Run Bus came a little bit later. But the Hut Run Hut first time was about 8 years ago, and very first year we sold out the trip, and now I've put together, I'm coming up on 18 trips. I've got 3 trips this
Wow.
coming summer. I've got a couple bus trips. I've got a trip in Japan, and then a trip in Mexico, and now here in Santa Fe, New Mexico, I've got another trip. And so it's not just a way for me to make money, but it's also a way for me to share my love for the sport and to get people out there, and frankly to get to know a whole bunch of strangers
Yeah.
one-on-one quite intimately. I feel like I'm in a great position to get to know people. It's you know, I didn't think that I would have that opportunity 15 years ago to, you know, to be on the trail with somebody, with a doctor or an IT person, or, you know, whatever it is, from every corner of the states and then oftentimes beyond, to get to know complete strangers in that way. So yeah, kind of piecing it all together. That's kind of how I make a living these days.
I don't know about you, but if we could organize like an exclusive to Journey hut run hut
Definitely.
trip, I would raise my both hands.
All right.
We're in. Can I just ask a quick
Nick, go
question,
ahead.
Rick?
Of course.
Ricky, fantastic to have the opportunity to speak with you and have followed your journey for some time, and you really are an inspiration. I'm sure you hear that before, but so just to say that. But a question around, the creativity that you've brought to your career and where you see that going. It's been fantastic to see some of the projects you've talked about. And obviously your work as a creative, as an artist. And I just wondered if you could share a bit more about that and how you think about that and think about your craft as a sort of cultured runner, I guess, or what was a concept runner?
Yeah.
Can you share a little bit more around that?
Yeah, so I mean, I've always been interested in writing and photography. I took my first photography class when I was in high school. I had the same English teacher in high school 3 years in a row. I just really loved his teaching style. And so I kept requesting classes with him. And then into college, I took a lot of writing classes as well. And then sociology and photography were my main focuses in the university. So that part of me has always existed. And then, I had this kind of side passion of running all of this time. And this is where I have to state that like running is an endurance sport. And of course we know that, when you go out for a mile, it's 5 minutes of pure suffering. When you go out for 50 miles, it's 40 miles of pleasantness and 10 miles of suffering.
Yeah.
And then I think most of us can attest to just the journey of running itself is an endurance sport, is an endurance endeavor. And this is something that like, if someone wants to get into running, you have to tell them like, just to warn you, you're not going to be great at this right away. You might not even love it right away. It's going to take some time. It might take years. And then I apply that same sort of mentality to art and writing at the same time. It requires patience over years and years, and not necessarily looking at an end goal, but appreciating the journey that you're on all throughout. I think that's what's most important.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I totally agree. Can I just ask what's in the background, on your shelves there? Are those all your sort of creative samples?
Jams.
Yeah, so
What have you got?
yeah, jams. I started traveling pretty early on after my freshman year of college. I was going to Lewis and Clark College, a small private school in Oregon. I was paying, I think the school was like at that time $35,000 a year, and I was paying for half of that, which is a lot of money for a 19-year-old that doesn't really have a whole lot of concept of money. And I had no idea what I was studying. I was partying a lot, and I decided after my freshman year, like I'm not ready for school yet. So I took 2 years off of college, and one of those years I went down to South America, and I came back from South America with every single little souvenir that you could possibly imagine from Bolivia, Peru, Ecuador, northern Chile, and my bag weighed 75 pounds. And I got home and I'm like, what am I going to do with all of this stuff? Like most of this stuff is pretty meaningless. Like, and I don't think I have anything left from that trip. It was on the next trip that I took. I actually went to Italy the following year. And I'm like, I'm not going to buy any souvenirs. Every souvenir that I've ever really wanted is here at my feet. And that's when I started collecting dirt samples from all of the places that I went to. And so behind me, you've got about 250 jars of sand and dirt and stuff from all the different
Brilliant.
places that I've been to in the world. I just pulled two at random off the shelf there. This one's from Normandy. This is Gold Beach. They're important to me because it's like I look at this and not only am I reminded of like world history in this. This is where the U.S.
Yeah.
landed in Europe in World War II, but I'm also reminded of the people that I was with at that time and the day that was. It was like I was with Pierre, I was with my little sister. It was a windy day, as it almost always is in Normandy. And this is way more meaningful to me than anything that I could possibly purchase in those places. And then the other one is from Fort Bragg in Northern California. So
Okay.
yeah.
It's like just like you said, more meaningful than like just a magnet or yeah, I know. Wow, it's really different.
For a moment, I thought that was the CBD samples they sent you.
Yeah. 250 samples of CBD. Yeah.
Before we talk a little bit more about what your projects about your projects, since you have like years of experience, like running experience, I really like a sentence that you have that's like it doesn't matter all those like fast times, you know, we need more stories. And I really like that sentence. What running means to you? Like when you think about like, okay, this is my life, because running is somehow, of course, you have your family, but running is part of your life. What's the meaning of running to you?
Well, I think in order to answer that question, I have to go back to what I was saying about running itself being an endurance endeavor, because running has meant so many different things for me throughout the course of my life. Like I had said initially, you know, I got into running because I wanted to hang out with my friends. And that was like, there was absolutely nothing more important to me at that time in my life than to hanging out with new people and my close friends and the price I had to pay was to run 5 miles a day. You know, it was yeah. If you couldn't have convinced me to have done that on my own, it was because it was a social community for me. Um, and then I kind of felt that same thing when I was going on to college. But that was sort of slipping away a little bit. It was like, all right, I've got my friends here, but I'm not going to pay $35,000 a year to have this experience. Like I need more out of this college education than just friendship on the cross country team. And so it was a little bit after that where I started pursuing the trail and mountain running. And running to me at that time, this is my early to mid 20s, what it became like sort of how I define myself in terms of both like my ego and my physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just I really appreciated that level of suffering and those results that I was getting out of it. Um, and then still fast forwarding a few more years after I'd got some travel under my belt and discovered that I could see the world through running, as you know, running was paying for my travels. It became a means to travel for me. So that's what running meant for me at that moment. It was a community around the world that I got to really explore the world through. And then you fast forward a little bit further, and I'm not competing as much, but realizing that this mode of transportation is a really great way for me to get to know my own country. And that's where we start to look at my run across the country and running every single street. It became a way for me to understand society, frankly. And then, you know, at the end of my run across the country, after I felt as though I had um, gotten a pretty good understanding of you at the very least U.S. society, it again went very, very deep into my own personal self and became a way for me to discover myself. Um, So that was 2017. We're now in 2021. And what does running mean to me now? I don't run every single day right now. I'm doing my every single street project here in Santa Fe, but on a much more casual
Oh,
level
okay.
than I was in San Francisco. And it's kind of gone back to um, it's a couple things. It's still a great sense of community here. It's how I spend quality time with quite a few of my friends. Um, but it's also become this thing that I have done consistently for 2.5 decades.
Wow.
And this is when I kind of try to impart to people, like, I don't think that running is necessarily the thing for every single person, but I do hope that everybody is able to find one thing that they can do for year after year, decade after decade, and ideally for their entire lives, because it becomes, it's a simple thing that you can do over and over and over again and recognize both how that thing changes for you and how you change. It becomes a mirror for yourself, and seeing how you've changed over all of these years.
Yeah. Amen to that. Yes, I totally agree with what you said. Uh, you talked about your, like, you don't run every day, which is something funny, because normally, is that something that you do even when you are focused on preparing for a race? Like, you don't run every day?
No, that's one of the things about in I'd like to say kudos to those that do run every day. But like honestly, like I love mountain biking so much. I love road biking. I love skiing. And there's days when it's like I love doing nothing at all, and for me that's perfectly okay. My goal is to be fit and to live a long and healthy life.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And I've listened, or I read somewhere that you are a fan of intuitive running, even if you are doing like hill training or speed work. Actually, yesterday we were talking about this on a clubhouse room with Nick. Like, do you do you still just go out? I won't say like without a watch or something, but you normally go with the flow. Like, even if you're doing hills or speed work or long run, you just, okay. So now I'm going out for 3 hours, and you just go.
Yeah, I still I do use my watch on certain runs, and it's usually the cases for that are if I'm doing an every single street run, and in my words I'm drawing a picture with my feet, or in other cases, I'm making a really solid effort and like an FKT attempt or something like that, and I want to record it. But otherwise, um, I've been doing this long enough, and I think most people, you don't have to be doing it that long to know that, like, to listen to your body and know that how hard you're pushing yourself. And I think there's a lot of benefit to that, to knowing that you can do a run, and say you want to do an hour effort. Like, when you start off on that hour, like, ask yourself honestly, like, can I do this for 1 hour? And I think that most of the time your body is going to tell you, your mind body connection is going to tell you, yes, you can do this for an hour, or no, you can't do this for an hour. And at that point, it's like, well, if I can't do this for an hour, how long can I hold this for? So I think that's extremely important. And then in high school, our coach, he was never that adamant about us wearing watches or heart rates or anything. He did ask us to check our heart rate in the morning. That was a kind of a way to gauge, if we're recovering or not. But there was what he called conversational pace,
Yeah.
and so that was super important. So it's like, okay, that's because that's when we get ourselves into trouble, is when we're not allowing our bodies to recover.
Yeah.
Pushing ourselves hard I don't think is the hard part. I think allowing ourselves to recover is oftentimes the hard part.
Yeah. Nick?
Can I ask you a question, Ricky? How do you? So yeah, just to that point, a couple of things really. One question was around who are your inspirations? So who are the people that you've looked to over the course of your career as a professional runner and as a writer and an artist that you've kind of drawn inspiration from? So that was one question. And then just to follow on from what you just mentioned actually about recovery, I had a question around what you do personally in terms of active recovery, just kind of lounging around, and how you go about that. So yeah, a couple of questions there really.
Yeah, so people that I've looked up to over my running career, let's see, early on, and he's still my very good friend here in Santa Fe. He's actually a year younger than me. His name's John Severy, and we've been running together for 25 years, and
Wow.
he's almost always been a little bit faster than me, and so he's been the carrot out in front of me. Back when I was in Boulder, one of the people that really inspired me to kind of look at running as a potential means for travel, his name's Jay Johnson, and he did really well at Sierra Zinal back in the 1990s. I went into his shop. He had a Fleet Feet franchise in Boulder, Colorado in the early 2000s, and I told him that I was going to go do a race in Europe. And he said, well, you should consider sticking around there for a few months. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And he says, there are so many races out there. You would just love it. And he ended up telling me about his time of going over to Europe for 6 or 7 consecutive seasons and racing over there. And I'm like, oh, wow, that sounds really cool. When I got over to Europe, an Englishman by the name of Martin Cox took me under his wing. He'd been kind of vagabonding around Europe for 10 years at that point, and that was 10 years ago. He's going on 20 years over there. And he showed me a lot of just a lot of ways to enjoy the sport over there and to train hard and sleep in your tent when a race organizer isn't putting you up, and to load up on croissants when they are putting you up, and to ask for what you want from the race organizers. And so yeah, a whole handful of runners, and most of them, as you can kind of see, are more kind of lifestyle runners rather than like Olympians or anything like that. In terms of writers, there was one. I mean, yeah, obviously Jack Kerouac. There are a lot of traditional American old school writers. Yeah, the Beats. A lot of those guys. But then there was a guy that's not as well known. His name is Ted Conover, and he's still around today. He wrote the kind of stories that I really was inspired to write myself. He lived, so it would take him 1 year or a year and a half to put together a book. And I'll just use one of his books as an example. It was called Coyotes, and this is about the undocumented immigrants, mostly Mexicans, going across the border. This is in the 1980s and 1990s. And he wanted to write more stories about this. And so he actually lived the life of an undocumented immigrant for 6 months. He crossed the border with them 4 or 5 times. He went into the fields in the Central Valley in California and worked their jobs, and just got to know them and their lifestyle strictly through living it. And then he would spend 6 months to 8 months in front of his typewriter or computer putting a story together. And so it was kind of like a non-scientific anthropological look at all of these different little subsections of society. He wrote about the prison system in the U.S. He wrote about I actually got to meet him in the early 2000s or late 90s, because he lived in Aspen as a taxi driver for 6 months, and then wrote a book about kind of this Aspen lifestyle that he had gotten exposed to a little bit.
Cool.
And then your second question was about recovery. And that's again going back to really listening to your body. There was a time when I was running every day. It was in my 20s, mid 20s to late 20s, and that's when I was much more focused on being the fastest runner that I could possibly be, and all while not having any sort of training regimen whatsoever, with the exception of I have to put my running shoes on once a day and get out the door. And that's when I kind of like really started listening to my body. And, you know, I'd put my shoes on. It was like, I really do not feel good today, but I'd make myself put my shoes on, get out the door, and run 1 mile. And if I still wasn't feeling good in a mile, it's like my body's telling me something. It's time to head back and rest today, and I'll go about it again tomorrow. Today, currently, you know, I use biking a lot more than I have really ever at this point as recovery, both strengthening and recovery, just because it's so much lower impact. Running can be so impactful on your body that for me, being able to hop on the bike for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours is so important, and active recovery. It's wonderful and fun.
Yeah.
Thanks for
Um,
those answers. Yeah.
you, hey Sven, Pedro, do you have any question to ask Ricky?
Well, maybe I have.
Go ahead.
Ricky, just want to thank you for being here. It's an honor. I have to tell you the truth. I haven't heard about the legend of Rickey Gates until a month ago, since about the time I joined the journey. But it just took so little to become a fan, and I'm a little bit starstruck right now. But what I want to ask you is like, do you feel that that the Transamerica was like your biggest achievement so far? I don't want to you know, how can I say this? Well, I don't want to assume it was. To For what I know about your career, it might have been, but I don't want to assume. And if it is, it's okay. I totally understand. But if it's not, what do you think it might be? It doesn't have to be a race. It might be something you have done with your life, and if it's the case that the crossing of the United States is your biggest achievement, what are like the rest of the podium, number 2 and number 3?
Yeah, to answer that, I would be really hard pressed to point to any one thing that I've done, and I would argue that it's the same with nearly everybody in their lives. I think this group is appropriately called the journey. Like one thing has to happen in order for the next thing to happen, and then that has to happen in order for the next thing to happen. Like I would not have even thought of running across the country if it weren't for the previous 15 years in my running career. So even if it was the biggest, you know, achievement, I needed all of the things before that in order to pursue that endeavor. So I don't know. It feels a little bit like a cop-out answer, but it's I think there's a lot of truth behind that. We all have to take these paths in order to get to where we are at this current moment in time. With that said, yeah, I don't think I've ever gone that deep into myself physically or mentally in any other effort in my life. With that said, my project that I did following my run across the country of running every single street in San Francisco, I think 20 years from now, I'll look at that as possibly a more impactful project. And I say that because over the course of the past 120 years, the number of people that have run across the country, I would guess at this point is close to 5,000 people. And it used to be a huge thing back in the late 1800s. The pedestrianism, it was big money. In today's dollar terms, there was gentlemen out there that were making anywhere from 500,000 to $1 million in these prize purses to run across the country. Currently, to this day, I'm on a Facebook page of people that are crossing the country. I'd say there's probably 100 people out there right now that are crossing the country, and I know that each one of them are experiencing a lot of the same experiences that I felt. So for me, that doesn't necessarily demote the project all that much, but it does kind of point towards something that is a shared experience with so many other people. The Every Single Street project, I would say that I'm even more proud of, because it required my mind, the use of my mind, a whole lot more than running across the country did. It was like pure concept, and it really gave me an understanding of society that I couldn't have even anticipated at the beginning of the project. And it's something that I can ask people and suggest to people that they should do the same project in their hometowns. I don't have necessarily the same feeling about running across the country.
Yeah. That's I don't know if you know, like there's a movie on YouTube. Like the title of the movie is like How to Start the Movement. It's a very well-known movie where's someone alone starting to dance, and with time more and more people join him and start to dance right after the other guy. So Ricky, you were kind of like the guy that started to dance alone, and somehow you're starting a movement of people that, of course, before you, we know that other people tried and did like the going from one coast to the other coast of the U.S., but you somehow started like to promote more that movement, and with Every Single Street, more and more people are doing that. Like last Friday, I was running with Pedro in our hometown, and he said like there's this guy that he saw the streets that Rocky ran in the movie, and now everyone is doing that. So running those exactly same streets. I would like to ask, because again with the movement thing, you are someone that's just like that. You ran 11,000 miles with the Every Single Street.
1100.
1100, yeah, sorry. With and you just crossed the United States. I think that you started a marathon in Antarctica.
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So what motivates you to do these types of projects? You told earlier that, of course, like crossing the United States because you wanted to know more about society. Every Single Street, I know that in the movie you say that we don't even know our like neighborhood, and you just started to run Every Single Street. You started the marathon in Antarctica. What motivates you? Like, especially because most of the projects you are doing all by yourself, you know? So what motivates you to, one, challenge you, to go out and do those incredible / crazy things. And number two, where you just where the inspiration to do this comes from.
I think, well, I'll answer the second part first. I think
Yeah.
the inspiration comes purely from curiosity. And I think that curiosity is the most important thing that we can really hold on to. Kids are curious, like babies are curious, kids are curious, and so are like adolescents, you're curious. We become progressively less curious as we grow older. And it's something that I want to continue to hold on to through my adulthood and until the day I die. And then to kind of answer the first part of that question, we have this idea that, but and not everybody, but more and more we have this idea that everything's been done. You know, we've skied across Antarctica, we've been to the top of Mount Everest, we've sailed around the world, we've been to the moon. You know, we've broken the 4-minute mile. But you know, I think the creative and curious people out there look at the world and say, like, no, we haven't done everything. Like, you just have to be creative and curious and kind of follow those two things. And
cheers to that.
Yeah. So.
We are almost finishing this conversation. Let's just go for a last round. Sven, Nick, Pedro, do you want to ask any question to Rickey?
Yeah, hi. I have one question.
Go ahead.
So thanks for your time, Rickey. I watched your movie, and so from you being an artist, like a photographer, do you watch your footage right away, or do you wait like after the run or after the day to watch the footage and make sure it's good footage?
It kind of depends on the photographs. Yeah, it depends what I want out of the photograph. I know that on my run across the country, the photographs were immensely inspiring for me myself to keep running and to keep getting more photographs. There was sometimes at the end of the day when I was running across the country where it was a very hard day. It was a long day. It took an immense amount of effort to convince someone to get their photograph. And then I'm just kind of laying down as I'm about to go to sleep, and I look back through and I'm like, and I see this photograph of a person, and I'm like, wow, that was worth it. So when it's in terms of the photos, at least when I'm talking about running across the country, I did look at them a lot, and the reason that I was looking at them was for my own personal motivation and inspiration. A lot of the video footage that I shot for running across the country, honestly, I never looked at. And some of it I still haven't seen. It was just like, for whatever reason, it was kind of nice to be able to have a team of editors and true professionals where I could literally hand over 30 gigs of footage and say, you guys sort this out. I don't even need to look at that. So yeah, I really enjoy the editing process of still photography, and I loathe the editing process of videography. So yeah, and I don't know what can be understood from that.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Nick?
Yeah, Rickey, thank you so much for your time this evening today. Really appreciate it. And Francesca for setting it up too. Yeah, I suppose my only question is whenever you can come over to Europe next, will you come over and run with us all? We'd really love that.
Yeah, that would be awesome. Yeah,
that would be good, wouldn't it? So
Yeah.
when you're next over in Europe, that would be kind of cool. And I suppose one quick question then is of some of the sort of big mountain races or some of the stuff you've done, what's what I know they're all brilliant for different reasons, but what sticks in your mind is a really memorable kind of mountain cruise that you've done, ridgetop somewhere, amazing view.
Yeah. I was about to ask that question. Yeah. Thank you
Okay,
for that,
sorry, I
Nick.
took it.
No,
Yeah.
no, thank you. Thank you.
Well, the reason that I'm thinking of this right now is because I just did a ski race that started at midnight and finished. For me, it finished around 8 or 9 in the morning. It was this most recent full moon, and when you are doing an endeavor through the night, and especially with a full moon, I think that you're reminded of all the other times in your life that you've really experienced that effort and that place where your brain goes. And I was reminded of doing the Bob Graham round um, in, I think that would have been 2015 or 2016. 2015 with Scott Jurek,
Wow.
and for those of your listeners that know of it, you know of it. For those that don't, it's 65 miles, 26,000 vertical feet of climbing. Probably the biggest running achievement for fell runners over the past 60 years is to try and duck under 24 hours for those 42 peaks.
Wow.
And we did it in 23 hours and 48 minutes.
Wow.
So just
Yeah.
barely getting
Incredible.
under there. And I mean, I really do think that I'm going to think about that
Yeah.
moon set and sunset moonrise on that fourth leg of the Bob Graham round. It like I remember it back then, like bringing tears to my eyes. I mean, it's just that physical, mental place that you're in at that moment, and then combine that with some of the most incredible terrain that I've ever seen in my life. So that's one that sticks out immensely in my
Wow.
head.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, amazing, amazing. Thank you so much. It's been really pleasure to listen to you tonight. Thank you.
Something that makes me feel like you are in pain, but at the same time you feel like it's worth it. You know, like
Yeah.
yeah, incredible. One last question. What are the challenges that you are looking for in the future? So of course you told us that you are like kind of prepare yourself to come back to competition, but what are you looking for to achieve in the future?
Yeah, so I've got a project that I've been thinking about and working on a little bit over the past couple years, and I kind of like having a project that I know is going to take a lot of years, as opposed to running across the country or dedicating myself specifically to running all of the streets in San Francisco in a very short period of time. And I'm calling it the 50 Classic Trails of North
Yeah, I've
America.
heard it. Yeah.
And so this is just kind of a way for me to explore this continent and really try to find the natural settings, and ideally 50 of them that can help kind of paint a broad picture of what this continent has to offer. My parameters for it is that the trail can be done in under 24 hours to help kind of distinguish it from a long hiking trail, that I can, without question, tell somebody in, New York, if you've got a weekend free, fly to this part of, wherever, Wisconsin, and get on a boat to Isle Royal and go run the 50-mile length of Isle Royal, and know that they're going to have an incredible adventure. And lastly, kind of what I already said is that trail helps paint a broad picture of what this continent is all about.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Incredible. Before we finish, I would kindly ask Sven, Nick, and Pedro if you could just put your micro on, just for a quick and small gesture that we can do to thank Ricky, because I'm sure that if we could be in person with Ricky, we would finish with an applause. So I think that somehow we can. So, like on a count of three, let's just give a small or a big round of applause for this conversation, okay? If you, hey. So 1, 2, 3. So,
Yes.
Ricky, thank you so much for accepting to be the first guest of our first Journey Talk. It was incredible. You are a really inspiring person. Of course, we will keep in touch, and we will watch you for your next endeavors. Just like we say, you can go. We got your back. And we wish you all the success. Stay safe, and
Yes.
yeah, we will see you in the in the trail somewhere, hopefully in Europe.
Sounds
Yes.
great. Yep. Thank you guys
Ricky.
for having me. I
Thank you very much.
appreciate you, and I'm wishing you all the best with the journey of the journey.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Ricky.
Thank you, Ricky.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Pedro.
Yeah, and you, Francesco,
Thank you so
guys,
much.
Pedro.
We'll see you
Thank
around.
you,
Fantastic.
everyone.
Really,
Ciao,
really
Ricky.
enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Ciao, ciao.
Like,
Ciao.
ciao.